Hey everybody, thank you so much for clicking on this video. Today, we are going to talk about the Make America Healthy Again movement. MAHA, or Make America Healthy Again, is basically RFK Jr.'s brainchild, or his worm's brainchild. Sorry, I'll stop. Essentially, the movement claims that Americans have been poisoned by things like big pharma and big food. And look, I'm going to level with you here. I am not an expert in public health. I do not really know enough about food production, about vaccine development, about like the intricacies of seed oils to really make firm statements directly addressing the things that this movement is addressing. But with my expertise, I do actually have a ton of recommendations on how to actually make America healthy again. So I can confidently say that this movement is missing the forest for the trees. Let's start by zooming out and looking at the big picture. So what you're looking at here are the social determinants of health. This is a graphic from the CDC, which I fully realize RFK Jr. is not a fan of, but here we are. But this graphic shows us the different social determinants of health. Health meaning, do you have access to the tools that sustain a long, healthy life? And this is a fairly common concept that's pretty much accepted worldwide. Precision nutrition has their own adaptation with the 6 pillars of deep health. Even zooming out more, the World Health Organization also acknowledges similar pillars. So let's take a look at each individual pillar, and I'm gonna show you how in America, we're not really set up for success. The first pillar or social determinant here is education access and quality. All right, we're gonna acknowledge it again. Education and really like how it works in the country, not my wheelhouse. I don't have kids, so like I really don't understand like the grade level education system in terms of like public school funding, voucher systems, like not in my knowledge base. But here's what I do know. College level education is far too expensive. And I think everybody across the political spectrum can agree with that. Personally, I went to Temple University, TU Temple Maid, and I graduated in 2011. And by the time I graduated in 2011, the in-state tuition reached around $10,000 a year. Today, in-state tuition at Temple University is over $21,000. So it's over doubled. The tuition is over doubled, but minimum wage has not risen. Wages in general do not match the rising cost of education in this country. Now, let's talk about why education is important for your health. Again, we're going to stick to the things that I know, but education has been shown to make you a better critical thinker. Without getting too deep into this, I was raised Catholic, and me being a very type A person, I really growing up until I went to college was very black and white with my thinking. This is good, this is bad. If you do this, you're going to hell. If you do this, you're going to heaven. There was no nuance in any decision making. There was no nuance in any of my thought process. Everything was black or white, good or bad, because I was literally told never to question anything. So without the critical thinking skills that a higher level education gave me, and honestly just like living in the real world, that has helped me decipher bullshit. You see, I do it all the time on my channel, but it has been shown that people with less education are typically unhealthier. And there's a lot of factors that go into that, but those are the statistics. And by unhealthier, we mean your risk of chronic illness rises. Now, if we want to zoom out on this more, having quality education actually does open up your access to healthcare, because in our country, you either need to make enough money to buy into the healthcare system or pay for it out of pocket, or you need to have a high enough education to get a high enough paying job that will grant you quality healthcare. So if this movement really wanted to make America healthy again, I believe that they would do something about the rising cost of education, invest in the Department of Education rather than wanting to dismantle it, and make sure that the quality of education across the country is, good. So that brings us directly into our next pillar, healthcare and quality. Look, we can agree to disagree here, but I firmly believe that every American citizen deserves healthcare. They deserve to have health insurance. I am a believer in universal healthcare, and I know there are aspects of it in other countries that are not ideal. I don't think there's ever going to be a perfect system. And again, I am not an expert in health insurance, in, what this infrastructure would change over would have to look like. But what I do know is that other countries do it, and no human should be denied healthcare based on their income, based on a pre-existing condition, or have to worry about going bankrupt because they had to get into an ambulance. It, in my opinion, is absolutely barbaric. Well, actually, it's capitalism, but now, the other part of healthcare, not the, health insurance part, this is my specialty. So let's talk about this. We're going to divide it into 2 chunks, movement recommendations and nutrition recommendations. Let's start with movement. There's 3 things that I want to discuss here: strength training, cardio, and overall steps throughout your day. So the current recommendation for strength training is making sure that you get in 2 to 3 full body workouts a week that are about 60 minutes. Whenever I say this, people are like, oh, but I do 4 30-minute workouts a week, or I do 2 75-minute. Don't overthink it. If you are getting in some solid strength work 2 to 3 times a week, you're probably fine. Moving into cardio, the current recommendation is 150 minutes of moderate aerobic activity a week or 75 minutes of vigorous activity a week. Again, don't overthink it. A lot of times for me, some of my strength days, my Fitbit tracks that my heart rate is getting up into these higher zones. Throughout the week, as I'm going on walks, as I am running around the city, my heart rate gets up. So it's not that you need to spend 150 minutes at once getting in your cardio. You can pick that up piece by piece. Obviously, that's going to be easier to track if you do have some type of device. But for most people, I'm like, if you're getting in like a nice brisk walk and I don't know, a group fitness class a week, you're probably fine. And finally, we'll talk about steps. The current recommendation is 7,000 to 8,000 steps a day on average. This number actually shows that your risk of chronic illness plummets if you hit that number consistently. I know we always think of like 10,000 as being the gold standard, but these long-term studies have actually shown that your risk of chronic illness doesn't really budge too much once you get higher than the 8,000 step mark. So you can go for 10,000 if you want, but if we're just thinking of like the bare minimum long-term health recommendations, that's where that sweet spot is. Now, according to a recent study, only 28% of Americans are meeting these guidelines. That's way less than half. That's like a quarter, like a little more than a quarter. That's crazy. Now, you may say that people are just fat and lazy, but I see something different. First and foremost is time. Many jobs nowadays require 8 hours of sitting at a desk with an hour-long commute each direction. Many places in our country don't have sidewalks, don't have public spaces. Women get freaking murdered trying to go on a run before or after their job where they have to sit at a desk all day. Getting in all of this movement is not easy for the average American. The only people it's easy for are the people who can afford it. So if you actually wanted to make America healthy again, you would invest in our infrastructure, building more sidewalks, building more public spaces. My God, just changing the whole mentality of like, you get a week of unpaid vacation a year at most jobs. I don't know if that's true. I've never really worked like a real job like that in my life. Actually, I did. We'll save that for a different video. But the point being is that to commit to a movement routine of just the bare minimum is incredibly daunting and nearly impossible if you are an average American. Let's dive into nutrition, which is a big component of the Make America Healthy Again movement. So a lot of the discussions that I've seen have been about like seed oils and raw milk. Sorry. It's like literally crazy. Okay, sorry. So I know that there is more to the movement than that, but you know what I haven't heard about at all in terms of nutrition with this movement? Fiber. Did you know that the average American only gets about 10 to 15 grams of fiber a day? And the average recommended amount is between 25 to 40 grams a day. Now, why is this so important? Fiber has been shown to be a huge part of decreasing our risk of colon cancer. I'm sure you've all seen this, but colon cancer is not only on the rise, but especially on the rise in younger individuals. I actually lost my uncle to colon cancer earlier this year. Last year, a friend of mine who was just 35 died of colon cancer. But the thing that we're talking about in this movement, or that at least I hear happening a lot, is about seed oils, which studies have shown in moderation are perfectly fine to consume. Again, do we want to be ingesting these things in large amounts? No, but small amounts have been shown to have pretty much no negative impacts on our health. This is just the perfect example of missing the forest for the trees. We want to focus in on these little tiny details when we haven't mastered the big picture. This is something I talk about all of the time. If you haven't mastered these basics of health, getting in your strength training, getting in your steps, eating colorful, minimally processed meals, why are you going to jump to something like raw milk? Why are you going to jump to something like supplementing with 18 different supplements? If you actually wanted to make America healthy again, you would divert the subsidies that go to things like corn and rice, which end up producing a lot of our processed foods that this movement is demonizing. You would divert those subsidies to things that are fiber rich, farms that produce fruits and vegetables. And that would help make them more affordable and more accessible to people across the country. Let's jump to our next pillar, which is neighborhood and built environment. We already kind of discussed this a little bit with like our infrastructure and movement in terms of like sidewalks, public spaces, because literally like how are people supposed to get their steps in if they can't walk anywhere? I live in New York City, but I have, again, I guess this is a story for another video, but I used to be an actor. I've toured across the country, I've worked at different regional theaters, and then I've just like traveled. And it is wild to me that if I open up my phone somewhere and I want to get somewhere that's half a mile away, I can't walk because there's only highways. I can't walk because there are no sidewalks. It's just dirt roads. I almost ruined a bachelor party because the bar we wanted to go to was half a mile away, and I said, we can walk that, and there were no roads, and we almost got hit by a car in the dark. And that was in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. We should have sidewalks, people. Anyway, I can't imagine having to get in my movement by being like a hamster on a treadmill, but that's what a lot of people have to do. We can zoom out even more and talk about the fact that there are towns in this country that don't have access to clean water. We could drastically improve the quality of our air and our overall pollution to the planet if we invested in things like public transportation. But again, all of these things require a huge overhaul of the current systems that we have, and just, quite frankly, I understand would not be sustainable in a capitalist country. Let's dive into the next social determinant, which is social and community context. I've talked about this before in a video, but one of the things I really think that we're missing in the country is access to third spaces. So a third space is like, think of your favorite sitcom, like Friends, it's the coffee shop, How I Met Your Mother, it's the bar. And I did talk about this once, and I had I think it was like 2 people. So 2 people were like, we have that in the country. And like, we don't, because the culture in at least a lot of our country, I know other places are more slow paced, but at least let's talk about New York City. The culture is everything's expensive because we have to pay our rent because landlords are raising everything really high and property taxes are skyrocketing. So get in and get the fuck out. When we traveled to Europe, we were like shocked at the fact that it was so chill. You could like sit on the sidewalk and have a glass of wine for like an hour and no one's bugging you to like move and, order more stuff. Anyway, that's kind of a side tangent. But I think that in general, we are lacking these third spaces, a lot of community groups. And this is actually my theory of why I think a lot of people who maybe don't even grow up religious join churches, because they're kind of like a built-in sense of community. Someone actually recently commented on that video telling me that libraries are third spaces, and I fully agree. Let me give you an example of why, though, I think we can all see like libraries are being underfunded. Library funding is even being cut in New York City. My library, we have 2 locations in my neighborhood. One was closed for 3 years. The other one was closed for 2 years. And when they finally reopened, their hours were drastically cut. I'm in New York City. Think about other places. But anyway, why is this important? Again, this is not really my wheelhouse. A lot of the things I'm discussing are just kind of opinion and anecdotal, which doesn't really hold up in the grand scheme of research. So let's talk about what the research says. Research time and time again has shown that having a better sense of community and being involved in a community does lead to better health outcomes. Health outcomes, we're talking about living a long, healthy life, reducing the risk of chronic illness. Finally, we'll touch on the last pillar, which is economic stability. Honestly, I think after everything we've discussed, we can see why having better economic stability, aka being more financially secure, would lead to having better health. It's just easier to be healthy if you can afford it. So in my opinion, if you actually wanted to make America healthy again, you would raise the minimum wage, you would put laws in place to keep corporate greed at bay, and honestly, you would outlaw, you would make lobbying legal. I think if lobbying was illegal, it would solve like 99% of our issues. What do I know? Anyway, that's the video. I know there's going to be people chiming in that are just going to say like, keep politics out of it, and I don't want to hear about your politics. I'm not even going to sit here and say this isn't political, because it is, but health is political. And I firmly believe that if you are in this field and you are not a proponent of making healthy options and healthy living and, health care accessible to all people, you're in the wrong profession. This isn't a profession about getting rich. It's not about having influence. This is about helping people. And everything we just talked about are ways to actually help people. So that's the video. If you have any questions, leave them down below. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out, and I will see you all in the next one.